Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book, UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. Once again, going into the final chapter, chapter 12, and this will be part 5 in dealing with the conclusion. That's essentially the title of the chapter. I think there's maybe 2, maybe 3 more parts after this, and then that's it. It's going to wrap everything up. So in this case, this next segment has to do with a strange theory or hypothesis associated with Earth lights, and then another segment will be an interesting one. It's known as the time travel hypothesis. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start this here. I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on this as always. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as well. So here's what it says. It seems clear then that some UFOs are actually natural phenomena that definitely occur, but are ill understood, placing them in a kind of twilight world between the known and the unknown. Another example of this is the so-called Earth lights hypothesis, which has been proposed to account not only for UFO sightings, but also for apparent contact with alien beings. A Japanese researcher named Musia examined eyewitness reports from an earthquake that shook the Edo Peninsula on November 26, 1930. He discovered that 1,500 people had seen a variety of strange, luminous phenomenon at the time of the quake, including lightning-like flares, shafts of light, and round fireballs. In 1977, Michael Persinger and Giselle Lafreniere published a book entitled Space-Time Transients, in which they developed a theory that light phenomena can be generated by tectonic processes within the Earth's crust. Indeed, these processes need not be of the severity associated with earthquakes. Even minor tremors can produce ionization effects in the atmosphere above the epicenter. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that many UFOs are sighted over regions known to contain geological fault lines in which seismic activity occurs, for example, Hessdalen and the Pennine Range in England. In addition, some UFOs have been observed to emerge from or plunge into the ground, although this has resulted in some extreme speculation that such objects are in transit to or from their underground base. The theory put forward by Persinger and Lafreniere seems more promising. Some researchers have even had some partial success in duplicating such phenomenon under laboratory conditions. Dr. Brian Brady subjected samples of quartz rock to extreme pressures, resulting in the discharge of small lights as the rock was crushed. However, it must be admitted that this experiment depends on unfeasibly high pressure, and also that the phenomenon thus produced lasts for mere moments, unlike genuine light phenomenon which can be observed for many minutes. At any rate, what is certain is that further research along these lines is justified, not least because of an understanding of the mechanics of seismic-related light phenomena and how it could, conceivably, lead to a practical method of predicting earthquakes. As mentioned above, it has also been suggested that the brains of human beings who find themselves in close proximity to such seismic charges might suffer from the scrambling effects of intense electromagnetic fields, resulting in a powerful hallucination. The salient features of this hallucination might well be determined by the percipient's cultural background. In other words, a person today seeing an unidentified light hanging low in the sky might well assume that it is some kind of technological device, and if its behavior is inconsistent with any such device with which the percipient is familiar, such as an airplane, balloon, satellite, etc., then he or she might well take it to be an alien spacecraft. As the electromagnetic field began to stimulate the brain's neocortex, the percipient would experience a hallucination profoundly influenced by the assumption that the light phenomenon was a craft from outer space, probably containing alien beings. An interesting experiment was conducted on British television a few years ago in which psychologist Dr. Susan Blackmore, who subscribes to the theory outlined above, was placed in isolation while wearing a helmet specifically modified to produce an electromagnetic field around her head. When the helmet was activated, she experienced something akin to an abduction. Suddenly, extremely afraid, she felt something taking hold of her ankle and reported that a powerful presence seemed to be in the room with her. Although Blackmore's experience was nowhere near as profound and terrifying as that reported by genuine abductees, the fact that it had been induced by the electromagnetic stimulation of the temporal lobes of the brain would seem to indicate an avenue along with further serious abduction research might proceed. And again, the next segment is called the time travel hypothesis. As mentioned earlier, the humanoid characteristics of UFOnauts constitute a serious problem, one which perhaps more than any other militates against the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Of course, any fan of Star Trek will tell you of the notion that eons ago, the galaxy was seeded with life by a race of super beings, thus accounting for the close similarity between intelligent creatures on various worlds. I would mention that this has more to do with special effects budgets than ancient super beings, but this would be a little churlish. It could conceivably be that this happened in reality, and it has been tentatively put forward to explain the unfeasible humanoid alien. It is, however, extremely doubtful. Even if the same building blocks of life had been distributed on worlds throughout the galaxy, the random mutations essential for its development towards intelligence would still come into play, forcing it along different evolutionary paths on different planets. The time travel hypothesis puts paid to all of these problems. It holds that UFOs are actually time machines. The Polish science fiction writer Stanislaw Lem calls them chronotraction devices, carrying our remote descendants on historical research assignments. This, of course, accounts quite elegantly for the physiological similarities between the UFOnauts and ourselves. Even the frail and spindly grays could be considered as our descendants of perhaps 1,000 years hence, or 10,000 or more. After all, they always seem to be harping on about the dismal future of humanity, how one day our species will become sterile through its irresponsible treatment of the Earth's biosphere, and that they are here to harvest genetic material so that the human race can be restarted elsewhere. This would naturally also account for the genetic compatibility, another serious problem with the ETH between the Greys and their victims. As mentioned briefly above, the UFOnauts may be historians of the distant future who are traveling into the past to observe the Earth's history at first hand. This would account for several attributes of the UFO phenomenon, most notably its apparent ubiquity throughout history. It could also account for the observed ability of UFOs to materialize and dematerialize, which might occur as the onboard time machine is activated and the craft heads off further into the past or back into the future. Time travel, like interstellar travel, is a commonplace in science fiction and has always been considered a physical impossibility. But like interstellar travel, it has received more serious attention from theoretical physicists in recent years. There are a number of possibilities that might one day lead to a practical time machine. For instance, space-time is composed of 4 dimensions: 3 of space, the left, right, forward, backward, up, down, and 1 of time. The 3 spatial axes extend at right angles to each other, and the time axis also extends at right angles to the spatial axis. This is extremely difficult to visualize, but can be described easily in mathematical terms. If the hypothetical gravity amplifiers described earlier can be made to distort a local region of space-time sufficiently, the time axis could be warped to the extent that it becomes a spatial axis. Time travel would then be possible. Now with that, let's go ahead and let's pause it here, just as it's about to get into some further time travel theories, and let's talk about the segments. So the first one, the Earth Lights hypothesis. So I've never really heard of this one before, per se, but I have heard about strange phenomenon that happens during natural occurrences. Like, you ever notice that when a volcano erupts, there's lightning, like really strong lightning that's seen throughout certain locations. And in this case, it deals with the fact that very strong pressure within the Earth, the tectonic plates, is somehow causing light to come across from it. The problem I have with this one is one of the lines mentioned it correctly. It's one thing if it's happening for just moments. It's another when it's observed for many minutes. Like, how does that happen? Also, people see the UFO, like they see windows, right? They see that there's people or things inside the windows. They see lights as well, like blinking lights. they see motion on the UFO, like stuff moving about. So how does a light create that? Like, that's an issue that I have with that too. The time travel hypothesis is fascinating. I've heard of that one. It's the idea that every alien, every gray out there is us. They're basically going back in time, like taking a tour. And then once they're on that tour, they see us primitives to them, and then they say hello, or they do abductions or whatever, and then they go back. And it is interesting, the notion that this chapter was stating, that it explains why they look similar to us. Like, what are the odds? Two different galaxies, and yet both have a head, two arms, two legs, and a chest, right? So what are the odds of that happening? It's almost incalculable. And then also on top of that, you have the UFOs all basically staying the same look throughout different time periods. Our advanced technology now was far different than it was 30 years ago. And then even before that, another 30 years, it was different. But so one thing that has remained the same is UFOs. They've apparently stayed the same visage. So I like that theory more than the other one associated with the Earth lights, but let me know. Let me know what you guys and gals think. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.